Well, hello everyone. I thought that you guys are going to be in a food coma after all this food and you're not going to show up, but I'm glad that you guys are here. Welcome to Monkey Business to Isolation Testing. A little bit about myself. My name is Donna. I am just like some of you over here in the room. I don't come from a technology background. I actually have a master's degree in nuclear physics. I decided at some point in my career path to switch and join the technology wave that was happening at the time. I knew at some point that teaching was not for me. Some of the things that I encountered through my career, I met some interesting people, not the most interesting men in the world, because that would be cool, but they were interested enough. We had an idea, and we thought that idea worth something. Just like any startup company, we went through the growing pains of finding our perfect balance and perfect process at the time. Fast forward in the future, we went from 3 employees that have no idea what they were doing, to 200 plus employees with 500 power customers. We made enough noise. We ended up being acquired by one of our competitors in the Chicago area. After that, I decided to join the Hyatt family. I was actually hired as the quality manager with no team. I was asked to introduce automation to corporate America and to introduce quality processes to Hyatt technology. At the time when I joined, which was more than 2 years ago, there was a movement that happening within Hyatt, and the people who were leading the movement was Alex Zoglin and Matt O'Keefe. Alex Zoglin is the founder of Orbit at the time. And they wanted to start a startup within a corporate culture. We want to attract all the people who are very passionate about best practices and how we can move forward and change the way that we think of everything when it comes to technology. Within 1 month of my hiring date, upper management asked me to make a presentation. Make a presentation just like this one to go over the plan of how I'm going to improve the code quality in Hyatt technology, which was like, okay, I'll tell you what I think. One of the key components that I was trying to emphasize at that time is to stop thinking about quality engineering as a service and more treat it as a very, very crucial part of everyday development. We can designate a group of people and tell them, you are responsible for our code quality and how we look to the outside world. I wanted to implement quality best practices from the highest to the lowest rank within the team. All right, so that did not resonate well with management because well, we don't like change. We don't know the outcome of the change. We don't think it's a good idea. Not everybody was on board. However, what resonated with them is when I equated code with dollars. So if you write a line of code, it's gonna cost you an X amount of dollars. Now, if you want to maintain the same code, you're gonna probably spend X plus Y amount of dollars. Now, that Y factor can go up and down, depends on the ping pong match that happens between developers and quality engineers at the end of each sprint. And that's when they had their aha moment, because now you're talking about their team budgets. Nobody wants to take money from any team. Great, so now I have my management approval. The next thing is trying to get my team behind me to accomplish what we want to accomplish as a company. I always mention to my employees, joining a new team, it's like starting a new relationship. Everybody come to this new team with their ex-boyfriend baggage. What they liked in their previous company, what they hated, what type of tools they used, what worked for them, the team dynamic, the team structure, basically the good, the bad, and the ugly. I couldn't do the change on my own. It has to be a team effort. I couldn't say, this is my way and you guys gonna just follow. We had to put all these experiences on the table and pick and choose and say, okay, we're gonna do a one-step change or one process change, and let's try to revisit it within, let's say, 2 sprints or a month and see how we're doing. Maybe we want to revise it. Maybe we want to change it. And that really worked for us at the time. Great, so now I have management, I have my team, I think we're good to go. No, not really. There was a lot of obstacles in the way. Just like any team, resources is a big problem. So on the development side, our developers were more tier focused versus being a full stack. On the quality engineering side, I was it. There was nobody else. I remember at some point I had to do 6 hot fixes in a week. I was going like a zombie at the end. So I had to create a new team structure. I had to come up with what quality engineering means in Hyatt, what type of job description we put out to the world, what type of people we want to attract. There's a lot of people say testing in the classical term is dead, and I completely agree with that. Because you don't want to hire bug finders. You want to hire bug preventers. So we needed to change the way we think about it. We had a very poor process at the time. I feel really bad, thinking about all the dirty laundry that I'm putting right now in the land of the competitor today, but hopefully they are not listening. The lack of process. We had 2 ends of a team. We had developers that operate in a very advanced agile workshop, and we have stakeholders, product owners, and business analysts that they are living in Planet Waterfall. So both of them were talking about different terminologies and different approaches, and we had the pointing fingers going back and forth. So we had to do something about that. We have to send those people to understand what is their job responsibility in an agile world, as well as sending those developers for more training to follow development best practices, to learn not to throw code over the fence, to hire more people that they are more on a principal level and can mentor those existing members. All right, so we got resources, we got approvals, we got processes. We should be blazing through these stories. Our speed should be skyrocketing. But as I always say, Jira doesn't lie. We were going snail speed because we inherited a very massive, messy legacy code. We basically didn't know what's under the hood. Every time we tried to tackle a story, it took us really long time doing discovery to know if we're gonna change this little piece of code, nothing else is gonna break. So it was very challenging. And that's when we made the decision, you know what? Maybe it's more feasible to rewrite the whole platform of Hyatt.com while maintaining our moneymaker and slowly transitioning all the services to the new platform. And everybody was excited. I was excited. Who doesn't want to be part of something that is built from the ground up? We have the tools, we have the ideas, people are meeting about plans and all of that. But the biggest problem of all was we were not able to deploy any of our code to production. And that just killed everyone's dreams, because that goes against, you trying to push for a CI/CD approach and all of that. We had to rely on a third party to deploy our code to production. Never to forget that this third party lives in a different time zone, that is 13-hour difference. There was a lot of miscommunication, there is a lot of errors that happened, there is a lot of rollbacks that we had to deal with. And that's when our operation team really took, the bull by the horn, and they were like, okay, within 6 months, we're gonna migrate the whole company to a new data center, and we're gonna be able to have as many environments as you want. You can do whatever you want with it. And they did, which was great. All right, so now, we had problems and we had solutions. The next step was actually to build an automation framework for Hyatt.com. Now, the challenge is to actually create a framework that actually works. It's gonna work today and it's gonna work when I leave the company. That means it has to be sustainable. That means all the scripts has to be very solid. They're not brittle. They are reusable. Most of teams, they get into the hype of automation. Let's automate everything, automating left and right. But it's really, you have to be smart when you automate your application or platform. You have to know, okay, is it, stable enough for me to do all these wonderful things with it? Am I creating more work for myself trying to maintain all of that work? The last thing you want is to have so many different tools with single use, and they are very hard to integrate with your services, and they don't speak to each other. So most people ask me, well, how did you come up with your technical stack for your framework? And the answer is, it wasn't my decision. It was a team decision. It was a meeting between me, the director of architecture, the team lead of DevOps, director of operation, and all the key players in Hyatt technology. And we came up with a stack that worked for us. It took us almost a year to have a very comprehensive and good coverage for our platform. We were able, within a year, to make automation as part of the definition of done. We put quality in all aspects of the product lifecycle, and we had a more coherent process dealing with other teams. So we were not only pinned to the corner trying to do functional testing day in and day out. We were working with ops, we were working with DevOps and DevX and all of these things, all of these teams. We created standards for our company when we deal with third-party vendors. Okay, you're gonna develop that piece of code for us, and after 6 months say, we are ready to merge it with your platform. Well, guess what? You have to follow these rules, and you have to follow our testing standards before you touch any code within Hyatt.com. At that time, I thought, I actually reached my potential with my team. I am the star. This is it. I just have to delegate and live my life. That was until I met Neil, who is actually speaking next door. I encourage all of you to have a chance to stop him and talk to him. He's a very brilliant individual. So I met Neil during one of the bi-monthly meetings with Sauce Labs. We were discussing, Victor, here, you're my golden child, you can raise your hand. Me and Victor, we were meeting with him, trying to, refine our test, like minimize our false positives, how we can greenify our test going forward. And he mentioned something about isolation testing, and I'm like, what is that? I have no idea what's isolation testing. And he said, all right. It is when you test a single story very, very early in the process and before you merge a pull request to the trunk. With this approach, you're gonna discover bugs really early in the process, and you're gonna recover very early. You will avoid testing any of your stories for the first time in your QA instance. So you are not waiting for it to go through, let's say, the integration and then go to QA and all of that. This is the first step probably you need to take if you're trying to implement a test-driven development within your team. So I had to do my homework, and I went and I looked everything up I can learn about isolation testing. But I didn't know how to translate that to our developers. So I went to one of my principal developers and I asked, okay, well, this is what I want to do to my team. I want them to really test and work with you in parallel before you actually merge your change into integration. I want to have a code that is as pristine as possible before we go integration. Even though the integration environment is meant for development, that doesn't mean we have to clutter it with everything, just because, you know what, this is what it's made for. And he suggested at the time, we can use AWS instances. I was like, okay. So he said, okay, we can use AWS instances. We're going to give each developer an AWS instance, and then you guys can remote to it and test before we merge our code. Well, our financial department did not like that, because even for a company in our size, I had 5 developers. Each one has their AWS instances, and then multiply that by 5 teams. So that bill was very hefty. We had to come up with something else. And that's when Docker came in play. So for you who are not familiar with Docker, so Docker is a wrap that you can contain a piece of software in a complete file system. This container can have everything that you need to run it. So it can have the code, system files, system libraries. It can have, basically, it's a sustainable unit. And the benefit of it is you can run it the same regardless of the environment. All right, go. All right. We did implement Docker. It wasn't something that I came up with, but at the time, our department, our architecture department was trying to get over the problem of not having enough environment, you know, to test and develop. And there's a lot of project that has to be isolated on the side, and that's what they came up with. So we utilized what already was in place. I thought isolation testing is going to be very beneficial for our quality engineers. But it actually put a different comfort level and brought a different comfort level for our developers. Our developers were more confident to change a small piece of code without worrying about breaking the workflow of the application. And that worked for them. They were very happy, especially when we are writing the platform from the ground up. There was a lot of initiatives of collaboration. Now, why is it important? It's better time management. As I said, you can test as early as possible. You fail fast. You refactor. You recover fast. There's no technical dependencies. So because everything is isolated, you are basically running a copy of production with only one change or one user story. So you know if you broke something, it's probably you. Cleaner test environment. There is only one test that running on that environment. So if you said, okay, I want to change, let's say, the drop down for the language, go ahead. Do whatever you want. If it fails, guess what? You can restart your container and you can start over again. Scalability. You can actually use this method and use it on any number of Scrum teams, because there is no interference between tests. Each one is completely isolated from the other team. Now, I talked about isolation testing, all of that, and I was debating if I should show you guys the next slide, but why not? We still have time. So I don't know if, there you go, this is big. So this is actually what isolation testing look in terms of a workflow for your team. Let me use my tools here. They said I have laser. All right, here you go. So this guy over here is your product owner. He's trying to get all of your stories ready to go. This is your quality engineer reviewing everything for that sprint, making sure that all your acceptance criteria, all the mock-up and testing data are ready to go. Now this row over here is your developers, and this row over here is your SDET. Mostly these two people work very, very closely. They mostly the SDET try sometimes to get a head start is to remote to the Git fork for the developer before it moved to the next step. Let's say this process completely passed, it goes for peer review, then everything would be moving slowly through a CI/CD pipeline in Hyatt. We will have a Docker container that it has the latest changes. Automatically will kick all the automation and regression tests that we have in place, plus the new tests that were written. Let's say that will pass, then you can move slowly from one environment all the way up to production. This is a very nice approach if you want to ship one feature at a time and try to avoid the Big Bang theory that, push in like 13 or 14 stories at a time. This is basically my presentation. I wanted to say something before I end it, and I'm not getting paid for that, but I think I should. We started with Sauce Lab because I brought my ex-boyfriend baggage when we were trying to implement our framework. And it was a wonderful experience. And I have to say that Sauce Lab became a standard in Hyatt technology. Everybody noticed how good the coverage. We did not have a cross-browser testing coverage whatsoever at any level before, I would say, 3 years ago. And with the capability of Sauce Lab, it became a standard, and we're trying to replicate everything that we did with Hyatt.com and take it and implement it in all the other teams. It became a very valid term. I was in a meeting with the VP of architecture, and during the meeting, he said, well, make sure we do that Sauce Lab voodoo that you do all the time. And I was like, absolutely, you got it. So I just wanted to extend our thanks to Sauce Labs to support us and introduce us to other opportunities and other partners, which we are working with right now, trying to kick our mobile automation framework from the grounds up. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming in. I think I have a lot of time, so I can take questions, and if I can't answer your questions, then Victor can jump in. All right. Be nice.
Yeah, and I'm happy that we're still on this slide here. So a lot of times what happens when you're doing things in kind of an agile way like this is there's that lag in between application dev writes the feature, he implements the user story, and then you need your SDETs to come through and actually create the UI test for it, right? Mm-hmm. And even in this diagram,
it doesn't have to be a UI test, though.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
Any sort of test, particularly if they're an SDET, then they're usually in UT and IT world. But even in your diagram here, we've got two different colors, which suggests to me that we're using two different code bases. And so, how do you deal with this problem of trying to keep a new feature testable and tested at the same time that it's being merged into develop? Are they in the same code base? And if they're in different code bases, how do you coordinate?
There's your question.
So the two approaches that we've taken within Hyatt are first of all, the easiest approach prior to the whole Dockerization thing and being able to run these changes locally is to just remote into the developer's local dev environment and be able to hit their services as they are being written. So that's the first approach. The second being actually getting access to their Git forks and spinning up these environments locally ourselves. And as they're committing their changes, we're able to quickly pull the latest and run those locally as well, and that gives us a head start. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, so are you committing then to a separate code base that's comprised just of your test suites, or is that still part of what becomes the application code?
We have a separate test suite code base repository.
So basically, if application devs open up a pull request, then it's your duty to effectively say, we've got a parity code pull request in place. stuff, if I'm understanding.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Victor.
Anyone else?
All right. Well, thank you so much.